All right, y'all. So I had to, my phone got too hot, so it ended my live. So I pushed it back in the shade a little bit, and it was on the portable charger. So yeah, hopefully we can get through this. I'm facing the sun. I didn't think the sun was gone. Anyways, all right. So I'm gonna back up a little bit because it did pause. So she's got time to talk to the girl. She said, "You go to Princeton?" I'm starting in the fall. A freshman, so this is your breakout summer. I hope so. Pat was intrigued by the sparks that seemed to shoot off this woman. She wanted to know more. What do? I influence people's lives 30 seconds at a time. In other words, I produce commercials. She held out her hand. The short, neat nails were manicured, deep russet. Althea Satterfield. Her gaze was friendly but direct. Pat felt like she was being committed to memory for future reference. Patricia Reed. She extended her hand, which she grasped firmly, shaken twice, and released. Who are you staying with? Maybe I know them. Pat prayed she did. Ruth Cook. She's one of my old teachers. She hired me to help her finish work on a book. We haven't met, but you got yourself... we haven't met, but you got yourself a working vacation. Smart. Pat wasn't sure why, but she was pleased Althea approved of her summer plans. They headed downstairs and settled on an empty bench. What's advertising like? Althea laughed. It was rich and deep, and Pat made a note to practice sounding like that. Like having a heart attack on a roller coaster, but I like the ride. Pat soaked up the details of Althea's career. Right after college, she started at Comstock Gravitt Green as a receptionist who made it known she was far too talented to answer phones. You told them that? Pat was amazed. You gotta ask for what you want. How else will you get it? Within 2 years, she was a producer. Not bad for a Brooklyn girl from the Albany projects, and I'm far from through. You grew up in the projects? Pat was fascinated. Yes, ma'am. Proud of it. Until now, Pat had never thought about advertising. The scholarship alums who returned to Southridge were always doctors or lawyers. Pat had pretty much decided to be pre-med because she liked the approving look she got whenever she revealed her plans. But late night sessions to meet impossible deadlines, travel to exotic locales, office intrigues, and seeing your work on TV, it sounded too exciting and glamorous to be work. A scratchy announcement instructed car owners to return to their vehicles. That means me. Have yourself a good summer and don't work too hard without playing harder. Maybe I'll see you around. I'm in Oak Bluffs just the weekend this time, but who knows? Althea winked and she was gone, leaving Pat feeling a little giddy. Miss Cook, in her tan polyester pantsuit, was a letdown, like watching the black and white portable after you've seen the color console. When Althea tooted and zipped by in her platinum 24 OZ, Pat sighed and climbed into Miss Cook's pale blue Opel Cadet. During the ride, she listened politely as her host showed her points of interest. My breakout summer. Maybe I will find a man. Her ears only perked up when Miss Cook said, "We're in Oak Bluffs. I wonder where Althea is staying." Pat spent the weekend trying to spot Althea. After that, she gave up and concentrated on her work, indexing and verifying photo captions for Each One Teach One, a biography of 20 African-American educators. After 2 weeks, she was bored senseless. She wrote Gail to say she was sorry, not for having her tongue in Marcus's mouth, that was unspeakable, but because their summer together didn't work out. She even sent Aunt Loretta lighthouse salt and pepper shakers for her collection as a peace offering, and she thought about Althea and what excitement she was probably up to. If you work hard, play harder. But so far, the breakout summer was a snooze. After a morning in the library, Pat passed the town tennis courts on her way home for lunch. She hadn't found the nerve to pick up a game yet, but she lingered at the fence watching a match. A languid heat rose in her belly when she noticed the muscled thighs and bulging forearm of the player as he returned to serve, and she could feel Marcus's touch again. I gotta stop this. I need to find a... Then she eyed the pretty butterscotch sweeties with long ponytails and short tennis skirts prancing on the sidelines. Who am I kidding? When she got back to the cottage, Pat was startled to find Miss Cook still in her bathrobe, staring out the kitchen window. What's wrong? My sister, she turned, and Pat saw her red, puffy eyes. They're not sure she'll make it. The last words were garbled in a failed attempt to choke back tears. Her sister and brother-in-law had been broadsided by an 18-wheeler that had lost its brakes. I have to go home to Detroit. She's the baby. She can't... I bet you can get a flight today out of Boston. Pat led her to a kitchen chair. I can't leave you here by yourself. It's not right. I'll be fine. I survived prep school, didn't I? Miss Cook always seemed to have it together. It felt weird to Pat to be taking care of her teacher like this. Besides, I'm not a minor. I'm 18, so don't worry. I'll keep working. You go see about your family. Miss Cook composed herself a moment. This book has to be done before my sabbatical ends this fall. I have the house until Labor Day. I can pay you in advance for the rest of the summer, leave you money for groceries. I'll be back as soon as I can. I can mail you stuff when I finish it. Everything's going to work out. You'll see. Why don't you pack while I check the ferry schedule and phone the airlines? Miss Cook was off island and on her way by late afternoon. Pat was sorry about the accident and prayed somebody would be okay, and prayed everybody would be okay. The next day, as a symbol of her newfound freedom, Pat stayed in bed until 10. She showered, dressed, coasted the Tryin out of the garage, and left to explore the island. Tufts of seagrass danced in the breeze along Nantucket Sound, and a deep breath of piney wood and salty sea grabbed Pat like a welcome home hug. Overhead, a gull squawked, and the sound carried her back to Swan City. She was a 4-year-old prancing in the yard, making faces and yucky noises until Ma Ray shucked oysters. This place felt more like home than any place since North Carolina. All right, y'all still here? My phone keeps overheating. All right, I'll put it even further so it's no sun on this thing. Jesus. Instagram, you done with me? Yeah, I'm going to just end it for Instagram. We're just going to end it because, all right. Lord, please don't let this phone overheat no more now. All right, where was I at? Miss Cook was off island and on her way by late afternoon. Pat was sorry about the accident and prayed everybody would be okay. The next day, as a symbol of her newfound freedom, Pat stayed in bed until 10. She showered, dressed, coasted the Tryin out of the garage, and left to explore the island. Tufts of seagrass danced in the breeze along Nantucket Sound, and a deep breath of piney wood and salty sea, grabbed Pat like a welcome home hug. Overhead, a gull squawked, and the sound carried her back to Swan City. She was a 4-year-old prancing in the yard, making faces and yucky noises until Ma Ray shucked oysters. Oh, wow, Ma Ray shucked oysters. This place felt more like home than any place since North Carolina. She wanted to find her niche here. Pat doubled back to town, parked the bike at the edge of the old Methodist campgrounds, and went in search of the Littlefield sisters. In the late 40s, they founded a private school in Boston for colored young ladies, and they had more photographs for Miss Cook's books. Pat wandered the maze-like paths lined with ornate Victorian cottages that looked like doll houses dipped in Easter egg dye, then iced in swirling buttercream. I'll never find it again. She was ready to give up when she spotted their purple and green house. The front door was open. Pat mounted the 2 porch steps, and Dorothea looked up from the coconut cake she was about to slice. "Look, Minnie, it's Ruth's little helper." Pat saw another lady seated on the doily-covered floral sofa. "I didn't mean to intrude. I can come back later." "Nonsense. Come in," Minnie said, and stood next to Dorothea. Never farther apart than their 11-month age difference, the sisters wore identical shirtwaists, one pink, the other green. Both had their hair in neat curls, tinted rue minx blue. When Dorothea introduced Pat to their guest, Mrs. Henry A. Jackson, wife of the Honorable Henry A. Jackson of Philadelphia, Pat felt like she should curtsy. Mrs. Jackson gave Pat the once-over, then zeroed in disapprovingly on the fuzzy dome of her afro. Pat explained Miss Cook's unexpected departure, then tried to escape the tea party, but the Littlefields insisted she have some cake. "This is Patricia's first time on the vineyard." Minnie handed Pat a cup of tea. "Well, there's no place like it, and so many fine young people. If my son were here, he could introduce you, but his father, the judge, arranged an internship with our congressman, so he won't be on island this summer," Mrs. Jackson said smugly. "Where are your people from, dear?" She probed with the bluntness of a double-edged razor. Uh-oh. Pat had planned to retire the tragic boating accident on the Chesapeake charade after Southbridge, but now that didn't seem like the time to admit her mother was a barmaid and her father wasn't anybody's guest. "You poor thing, all alone in this world," Dorothea offered sympathetically after Pat's rendering of the orphan saga. Mrs. Jackson stirred her tea thoughtfully. "So did your father go to medical school at Harry?" "Of course not. You said Chesapeake Bay. He must have been Howard then." Minnie scooted to the edge of the sofa. "Oh my, he would have been there after Nathaniel. That's our brother. But I bet Natty knows of your father. When did he graduate?" Pat felt panicky, like the little girl at the 113th precinct answering Tweed Coates' questions and trying to keep her story straight. "I don't really know. I wasn't even 2 when they died. There was no other family." "And no one gave you any more to go on than that?" Dorothea huffed. "They have robbed you of your heritage." Pat didn't know which was worse, lying about her heritage or not having one. She was still shaky from the Grand Inquisition when she emerged on Circuit Avenue to claim her bike. She wanted to stop having to explain who she was and why she belonged wherever she happened to be. Just because was obviously not a good enough answer. Dead Dr. Daddy and Mommy was no skin off anybody's nose, and if it made people think she was somebody, so much the better. One day I will be. She walked into the convenience store and surprised herself when she asked for a pack of Benson & Hedges Menthol 100s. For days, she worked at the kitchen table and smoked like a brush fire. Crammed in a stack of papers, she came across a yellow envelope, and inside she found a portrait of a woman whose face was brown and plain. Her eyes, magnified by wire-rimmed glasses, looked determined. A stern black hat covered her hair, and her sober, round-collared blouse had a slim silver brooch at the throat. There was no name pencil in shaky print or pen in graceful script to identify her. Pat studied the woman a long time before tucking the picture in her suitcase. If she remained unclaimed by the end of the project, Pat decided she would become a great-great-aunt on her father's side because it wouldn't hurt anybody. Boistered by her newfound family, she knocked off early, put on her navy tennis skirt, and left for the courts, determined to pick up a game. When she arrived, groups of people who obviously knew each other laughed and jived around. They looked like Ebony goes to Wimbledon, and Pat felt like a stepchild. What am I doing here? Patricia? Patricia Reed, what are you doing here? Pat whirled to find Edwina Lewis, arms akimbo, silk-like in a white midi tennis dress. Yes, somebody I know. But as she approached her Southridge classmate and the girl she was with, Pat realized that Edwina looked like Godzilla had just invaded the city. "I'm helping a writer I know finish her book. Why do I always have to explain? A job? You're kidding, right?" A couple of girls snickered and whispered something Pat couldn't hear. Edwina had depended on Pat when she first arrived at school, but once she got the hang of things, she went kind of crazy. She was frequently AWOL from the library. "Mommy and Daddy's money will get me farther than anything I'm going to learn here," she would tell anybody who asked. The party was always in her room, complete with Ting Tang, her concoction of Tang, and the vodka she smuggled into the dorm in empty shampoo bottles. Working isn't so bad. Pat positioned her racket to hide her chubby thighs. "I made my own hours, and right now I have a house to myself, so what are you doing up here?" Edwina eyes her friends. "Looking for hot fun in the summertime," she sang, and her girls chimed in, "Oh, Lord," like it was their theme song. These folks built here last year. It's pretty hip. The beach, lots of house parties, and fine dudes with attitudes." "You never told me your parents had a house here," Pat said. "I guess it never came up," Edwina answered. But Pat had asked Edwina about her plans for the summer and was told she didn't have any. Bet. They did intros all around. Then Edwina and her friends continued to talk about people Pat didn't know, places she hadn't been. She waited for Edwina to pull her coat, but it didn't happen, and her notion of having found a friend disappeared. Guys in a variety of sizes and shades buzzed by the hub, flexing their muscles and talking mucho trash, smooth as they want to be. Pat felt like a toad in tennis shoes. Then someone whispered, "Oh no, it's Willie." He was built like a bulldog, wide and low to the ground, but he had a baby face with his under his terry cloth hat. Sweat beaded on his brow, and his shorts rolled up between his thighs. "Any of you ladies care for a game?" The delivery was more determined than suave. "We were just leaving, Willie," Elena said. "I would," Pat said, and officially sealed her place as an outie. Willie Calloway was 20, a man. His dad owned a pharmacy in Brooklyn. He was studying pharmacy so he could take over when the old man retired. Pat thought Willie seemed sincere, if not exactly scintillating, but at least she had a tennis partner. When they finally got a court, they rallied for a while, not keeping score, just enjoying the play. With a racket in her hand, Pat calmed down, felt more in control. Willie bought her a soda when they were done and asked if she'd like to go out. A date. Pat was so excited she thought about calling Gail, but she felt too stupid to admit that she'd never been on one. They caught Star Wars at the island, which didn't really feel like a date because they went in the afternoon and they never actually touched, not even a handshake. 2 nights later, Willie took her for lasagna at Giordano's. Pat relayed their evening over cigarettes and strong coffee the next day. She decided Willie was nice, a perfect gentleman, in fact. His hand was a little clammy when he finally got the nerve to hold hers, and he chattered for 15 minutes in front of her door before he took a deep breath and kissed her goodnight. It was more of a peck. Pat was in no danger of igniting, but it broke the ice. Pat heard the putt-putt of the mail truck. She flicked an ash in her empty cup and went outside to get it. She was about to open the packet from Miss Cook when she saw the pink envelope with Gail's curly around script. Dear Pat, this is the best summer of my life. Brenda, you know Brenda from school. She was working at the record store in Green Acres. She said lots of stores were hiring, so I went and got a job at the Feminine Boutique. Can you think of a better place for me to work than a clothing store? Girl, I wear my paycheck and I look good. Brenda wanted me to share an apartment with her up on Hillside, but I told her no way. When I move, it'll be in with my husband, Baltimore Orioles star Marcus Carter. I've been thinking I could open my own boutique after Marcus and I get married. Lots of players' wives do stuff like that. I could call it Gail Carter's Fashion Chateau. Do you think that sounds French enough? So Marcus got this Boss Black Firebird with his signing bonus. He calls it Nighthawk because there's a gold hawk painted on the hood. His dad almost had a stroke, but it is fly. He said it fits his image because he's going to look like a player. When he drives me around, people look like they're trying to figure out who we are. They'll know soon. Anyway, he's sharing a place in a big old house in Erie, Pennsylvania with one of the guys on the team. He called me one night after midnight, so Mama was not too happy. He sounded kind of crazy, but he said they just got back from a game and he was still pumped up. First, he sounded all happy, and he invited me to see him play a real league baseball game next week. I haven't seen him in almost a month, and I can't wait. After that, he complained about how hard the schedule is and about riding for 6 hours on a broken-down bus to get to a game. He said the food was lousy and he works like a dog, but, you know, he sounded so proud. I sent him this cute little teddy bear and some peanut butter cookies I made to cheer him up. Yes, I made them from scratch before you have something smart to say. I guess he liked them. Oh, and I sent him pictures from the prom. I sent you some, too. I wish he'd write more, but he was so cute when he gave me instructions to get to the game, sounding all serious and everything. He made me write down the directions to the stadium and read them back so I wouldn't get lost. I'll take the bus to someplace called Pittsfield, and he's leaving me a ticket to sit in the wives box. Pat, I can see it now. I already got this sunflower yellow skirt and top because it'll be easy for him to find me in yellow. When they announce his name, I can just see him run out on the field and look for me in the stands. I stand up and wave and blow him a big kiss, which, of course, everybody there will see. After he wins, we'll go celebrate at some cute little restaurant, maybe Italian. I like Italian. It'll be so romantic. By next spring, I bet we'll be planning the wedding, the biggest thing they ever saw in Mount Moriah. I try to plan it for when you're not so busy with school, but that depends on Marcus. Winter is best for him, maybe around Christmas, but that's so long. I really wish you were here with me. I know Miss Cook needed you and all that, but you didn't have to leave so fast, like you were running away or something. Anyway, write me soon. Next time, I'll tell you all about the big game. Love, Gail. At least she doesn't hate me. Pat plopped into the big stuffed chair in the living room and threw her legs over the arms, and Marcus is doing what he said he had to do. The prom picture fluttered into her lap. The three musketeers. Gail looked pretty, as usual, but Pat thought she and Marcus looked like two stiffs who hardly knew each other, which was real different from the way they looked in the basement. The other photo was just of Gail and Marcus. Pat could hardly remember when it wasn't Gail and Marcus like peanut butter and jelly. Her arm was around his waist. Pat could hardly remember when it wasn't Gail and Marcus like peanut butter and jelly. His arm was around her waist. Her hand rested on his so you could see her wrist corsage, and she was smiling like everything was perfect, whatever that meant. Pat stuffed the pictures back in the envelope and forced her thoughts back to Willie. In the dorm, girls talked about sex all the time. A few even said they had some. The details were usually hazy, but the discussions used to make Pat lightheaded and juicy. Willie was old enough to be experienced with women. If I do it with him, I can get this woman thing under control and Marcus off her mind. Something had to replace the quivers that came whenever she remembered his kiss, and it looked like Willie was as close as she was going to come this summer. She figured she could lose her virginity and clear her head because she needed her head for more important things. The sooner she could pull this off, the better. With her sister stabilized, Miss Cook was talking about returning sometime soon. So when Willie invited her dancing at Atlantic Connection, Pat decided it was time to help nature take its course. At the club, they were barely acknowledged by Edwina and her vipers, who held court from a table at the edge of the dance floor. Pat concentrated on starting her own disco inferno with Willie. On the slow signs, he held her awkwardly in his arms and made wheezing noises that sounded more asthmatic than passionate. But Pat decided that she was only looking for an excuse not to follow her plan. She had fresh sheets on her bed, Lancer's rosé in the refrigerator, and the condoms she biked across the island to buy, stashed between the mattress and box spring for easy access. She couldn't say it aloud, but she longed for that rush again, this time without the guilt, and she was ready to prove the meltdown had nothing to do with Marcus. Willie drove her home and parked out front. You're so quiet. You feel okay? No. I mean, yes. Why don't you come in? He looked quizzical as he trailed behind her up the walk. This is it. Pat dropped her keys twice before she unlocked the door. Wine? She came back from the kitchen, gave Willie his glass, and sat next to him on the sofa. Silence. He should get it by now. Well, here we are. Alone. She sipped her wine. I'm glad I met you this summer, Pat. You're a great girl. They made small talk until Pat couldn't wait any longer for him to make the first move. She scooted closer and let her hand rest on his knee. He flinched, like it was hot. I like being with you. A whole lot, Willie sighed. It's just that, well, this is embarrassing. He looked like he was about to cry. I've never... Damn. That's okay, Willie. We can learn together. I thought you were, I don't know, experienced. Not exactly. What does he think I am? Not at all, really. Finally, Pat took his hand. Come on. Willie groped her breast, and his tongue felt like a hunk of raw meat in Pat's mouth. This isn't happening. But they fell into the bed, and he rolled on top of her with a weight that made it clear that this was not a mental exercise. Willie straddled her, humping like a V8 engine and slobbering kisses all over her face. He raised up and started fumbling with his pants, and suddenly Willie was free and heading for open water. No, you have to put this on. She fumbled under the mattress, and Willie whimpered helplessly as he sheathed himself in latex. As soon as they made contact, Willie started vibrating like he was possessed, then fell back to the bed, panting. He thanked her profusely, but as soon as he left, Pat got in the shower, feeling like she'd been struck by a mudslide, not a bolt of lightning. She decided that when she wrote Gail, she would omit her little sexcapade. It was just too gruesome. I'm Marcus Carter's fiancé. There has to be a ticket for me, Gail spit, ignoring the line that trailed behind her. Not a thing had gone right since Gail left home this morning. She'd argued with her mother before she even got out of the house. Loretta had packed a Channel 13 tote bag cast off by one of her ladies with 2 magazines and a white cable knit sweater, a pair of Keds with clean white socks stuffed in the toes, a blue headscarf, a plastic rain bonnet, a wet washcloth in a baggie, an apple, and a dozen vanilla wafers. Like I'm on my way to daggone kindergarten. Gail was so mad she almost left it on the subway. Marcus wouldn't forget to leave my ticket. Gail Saunders, Saund. The bus ride was torture. Gail thought they stopped at every town with the traffic light from Port Authority to Pittsfield. The diesel fumes made her want to vomit, and the 2 little boys behind her fought over everything from potato chips to matchbox cars until their mother would threaten to kill them. Gail was ecstatic when the Bratz brothers got up to leave, but then they had a little shoving match in the aisle, tumbled into her lap, and the berry punch lip gloss she'd been applying ended up in a purple streak across her yellow blouse. Oh, thanks. I'm glad you love them, girl. I can spell, miss. I get a couple like, oh, okay, hold on. Let me back up. Okay. Just talking about the little boys, lipstick on her. Okay. I can spell, miss. I get a couple like you every game, claiming to be girlfriends and such. Like I already said, there's no ticket. Either you pay for one or you get out of line. At the bus station, she had washed the lipstick stain, which made it worse, so she put on the sweater, which looked fine, but was way too hot for the muggy summer day. She emerged from the ladies' room to find she had missed all the cabs, waited an hour for one to show up, and now there was no ticket. Realizing she had no choice, Gail plunked down a crumbled $10 bill. Upper deck only, the ticket seller announced. Gail nodded her head, not daring to speak because the tears would fall. Sweat dribbled down her back. Not pleat was one left in her skirt, and the heat had made her hair rise like her mother's Sunday rolled dough. As she left the window, the bombs were bursting in air, and she had missed Marcus's introduction. Gail walked toward the gate, trying to compose herself. This will all turn out right. The Orioles were up first, but Gail knew Marcus would never see her up in the stands. She found her seat next to an old man who offered her a taste from the pint of rot gut he had lamely concealed in a sticky paper bag. His ripe aroma was enhanced by the relentless sun, and Gail held her breath, convinced he hadn't bathed in a month. He shouted obscenities at the Orioles, and Gail tried to ignore him, but then he hunched her to make sure she was involved. On her other side, a couple who had been lit-locked since she sat down had now draped the man's windbreaker across their laps and proceeded well past first base. This is not how it's supposed to be. I should be in the box seats with the wives. It was the third inning before Marcus came up to bat. His team had a man on second and one out. They were down 4-0, and Gail had to go to the bathroom in the worst way, but she couldn't leave now. She stared hard as he came to the plate, hoping she could will him to look in her direction. To her left, the woman moaned and panted. To the right, the old man belched and wine-scented spittle dribbled down his stubbly chin. Gail wanted to go home, but she scrunched in her seat and prayed for Marcus to get a hit. He tapped the bat on the plate 3 times, just like Freddie used to, shifted his weight side to side, and glared at the pitcher. 2 strikes and 2 balls later, the resounding crack of bat to ball brought Gail to her feet, heart pounding, but the center fielder caught the fly ball and fired it to second, catching the runner off the bag and retiring the side. Gail expected a comment from her vocal neighbor, but found him snoring peacefully. She slid past him, not even looking at her other neighbors, and went to find the ladies' room. The line snaked out the door and down the hall. Silent tears streamed down Gail's cheeks, and she fought to control the sobs that wanted to accompany them. "Hey, it can't be that bad," said a voice behind her. "It's always smarter to go at the beginning of an inning than at the end, but the line moves pretty fast." "No, it's just that Gail fished in her purse for tissue. "You ought to find another form of recreation if you're this broken up over the game." The young woman tossed her shaggy blonde hair and laughed at her own humor. "Or it's a guy, isn't it? It's always a guy. Shoot, cute as you are, there's always another guy." She dug a pack of juicy fruit out of her shoulder bag and handed Gail a stick. "Be grateful, hon. What's lethal is a guy who makes a living for the game. Trust me, I know. What's lethal is a guy who makes a living from the game. Trust me, I know." "That's why I'm here," Gail sniffed. "My boy's friends with the Orioles, but mine's the assistant manager," the woman interrupted. "Well, I guess he's technically still my boyfriend. We're getting married next week." "I'm Marianne, by the way. So how come you're not sitting with us? Our box is usually pretty empty for away games." She adjusted her red and white striped tube top as they finally reached the bathroom door. By the time they emerged from adjoining stalls, Gail and Marianne were laughing about the narcoleptic wino and the lovebirds who had nested next to Gail. "The wedding is in a week and you're here? Don't you have a million things to do?" Gail tried not to stare at her minuscule diamond ring as they left the bathroom. "Nah, we're doing it on the field right before Saturday's home game. Sunday they play a doubleheader, then they're back on the bus. But I'll be his missus. Most couples wait till the winter, but I'm 26. I've been waiting for the right time in Billy's career for 8 years. Worth of long distance phone calls, bus rides to nowhere, and crummy motel rooms by the hour. I told him he had to shit or get off the pot, so he finally shit. Dag, 8 years? That's pitiful." Gail stood aside while Marianne spoke with the guard at the entrance to the wives' box. He grinned, then nodded and passed. The other women in the box, home team spouses, paid Gail and Marianne no attention as the Orioles gave up 3 runs in the bottom of the 8th. But Gail was close enough to see Marcus's dimpled post as he worked his jaw when the umpire called the second strike on him in the top of the 9th with runners on first and third. And if it hadn't been for the cheers nearby, she would have heard his differing opinion when the ump called strike three, and his team slogged out of the dugout under the weight of their 11th defeat in a row. "Looks like you came for nothing," Marcus grumbled when he saw Gail waiting outside the locker room. We leave for Oenada in 2 hours. You want to get some food?" Gail's heart sank. He didn't act like he cared whether she was there or not. "This isn't how it's supposed to be." "Why didn't you leave me a ticket?" Marcus hoisted his duffel bag, his bare arms bulged bigger than when he had left St. Albans, straining the sleeve of his black T-shirt. He looked so strong and handsome that Gail almost decided not to pout. After all, he had a rough game. "I did. Frankie, he's the shortstop, said he'd take care of it when he made arrangements for his girl's ticket. If you really cared, you'd have done it yourself." "Well, he didn't, and I had to sit next to a smelly drunk and this couple that was practically doing it out in the open, and I'm sorry, and we're wasting time. I need a beer. You coming or not?" Marcus headed out of the park, his long strides leaving Gail trailing behind. "You don't act like you're sorry." "You don't drink beer." She remembered his speeches about staying in condition and how alcohol hurts your performance. "I do now." He didn't say there were other things he did now, too. They walked in silence for a couple of blocks until Marcus spied a sign that said "Pizza, Burgers, Cold Beer." Gail was horrified when he stopped. "We're going in here." Inside, there were 4 booths a smattering of red Formica tables with mismatched chairs, a long counter with 6 stools, and from an old Wurlitzer jukebox, Elvis crooned "Love Me Tender." A man wearing a sauce-stained apron over an A shirt and blue work pants appeared from the back and stared at them long enough for it to feel uncomfortable. When he spied Marcus's bag with the team logo, he shrugged. "Sit anywhere you want." "2 beers," Marcus said, as he and Gail slid into the booth in the front window. "I don't want beer, thank you," Gail said tersely. "Suit yourself." "Well, then you only need 1. You won't give me what I really need." "Excuse me?" Gail knew what he meant. He was on the road, away from home, feeling man enough to call his father Booker T when the old man wasn't looking. This was a test, but she wasn't giving up any of her good stuff. "Nothing." The beer was delivered with the menus. Marcus snatched Gail's glass and downed it in 2 gulps. Gail noticed the glimmer of gold peeking from the neck of his shirt. "When did you start wearing a gold chain?" Gail asked. "And where's mine?" "What is this, the 3rd degree? Damn, you sound like my father. I got it on the road because I liked it. Is that okay with you?" Marcus sucked his teeth, flipped open the menu. This was not the quaint cafe Gail had imagined. Instead of the flicker of candles, a fluorescent bulb buzzed overhead. She wanted to complain, ask how he could take her to a place like this and why he was acting this way, but she decided to try a different tack. "I'm sorry you lost," Gail ventured. "What do you have to be sorry for? I made a goddamn ass of myself with everybody counting on me, and you're sorry we lost?" "I only meant 2 more. Marcus waved a glass at the counterman. "And a pizza with the works." "Do you really think you need more beer?" I don't have to think about it. I just want the damn beer. I ain't had a fucking hit in 2 weeks. I didn't need anything that'll keep this shit out of my head for a while because I'm trying to get to the next level. Winter league ball in Florida, then spring training. But at this rate, my whole career will be on the fucking rookie league. What the fuck you do to your hair?" Tears seeped from the corners of Gail's eyes. "It's humid, in case you didn't notice." She angrily wiped at her face. "And I don't like it when you talk like that, like you're in the gutter." A few locals drifted in just as the pizza arrived at Marcus and Gail's table. "Didn't know you had Oreo on the menu, Joey," shouted a man with long sideburns. "It must have been pretty cheap today. I might have to try some." He stared directly at Marcus. Marcus stirred in his seat, and Gail could see his jaw tense and flex like it did when he struck out this afternoon. "I've seen better ball players in the Little League." The hairy heckler lit a lucky and stared directly at Marcus. "I don't need this shit," Marcus grumbled and slid to the outside edge of his bench. "Marcus, don't. Please," Gail pleaded. "This isn't happening. My sister plays better than that bunch of pussies," the guy in the tie-dye t-shirt added. "Is that because your sister's got bigger balls?" Marcus muttered. "You want to say that so we can hear it this time?" The man with sideburns dropped his cigarette in his beer bottle, slammed it on the counter, and faced Marcus. Gail buried her face in her hands as Marcus stood up, fist clenched at his side, and inched closer to the counter. "I said your sister's... Damn, we've been looking all over for you." Frankie and the 3 other Orioles plowed through the door. "The manager's been reaming us out for the last hour. He's on the bus, and you don't want to keep him waiting." "I got something to take care of," Marcus said. Frankie looked across at the men, glaring at Marcus, and sized up the situation. He grabbed Marcus by the arm. "I'm telling you, it has to wait." He nodded toward Gail. "You got your girl here and all. We'll be here again, and we'll kick Mets' butt." Marcus sucked his teeth, then relaxed his stance. The locals took a step back. Gail, who had been peeking through splayed fingers, finally dropped her hands from her face. "Okay, Gail may need to rethink marriage to him." Absolutely. She sounds a little more bougie and high sedity. And I don't know if you kept up with the other chapters, but basically Marcus's brother died when they were younger. They've all been friends since they were children, so I think this aggression is partially because she won't lose her virginity until she's married, and she's sticking to her guns about that. She has this lifestyle planned out in her head, which I think a lot of women do sometimes. We have this whole life pitched out, but what I found, and I'm still learning on this journey, I'm single, 32, but what I'm learning is when you get with a man, you usually have to fit into, their memo of what their lifestyle and what their plan is, and if you can get with that, great. It's not usually the other way around. Y'all might be able to work together or coincide, or y'all lives mesh together, but it's usually you gotta kind of, like, if your man is particular about certain things or has certain ways that he protect or guide or lead or whatever, like, you gotta be okay and trusting in that. And so he doesn't sound like he's going to lead or do the things in the way that she would like. You know, she got this whole, you know, fancy lifestyle, and he's going in a little off the wall piece of joints. Like, yeah, she definitely need to reconsider marrying this guy. But she's young. They're like 17, 18, like, you know, that young love stuff. All right, so I guess you heard I gotta go. Marcus saw the tears in Gail's eyes waiting to fall. Listen, I gotta take her to the bus first, he said to his teammates. We'll all go, cause if we show up without you, he'll have a shit fit. Oh, excuse me, Frankie said to Gail. The owner called a cab, and while they waited out front, Marcus introduced Gail to the guys, but she didn't hear their names. She was too busy hoping the car would come before the crew inside decided to leave. As he talked with his teammates, Gail kept her eye on Marcus. Something was different. He seemed angry, spoiling for a fight. When they piled into the rickety green and white cab, Gail ended up on Marcus's lap. Her head rested on his shoulder. She could feel his heart thumping against her, and it was the only moment of the trip that she enjoyed. Excuse me, it was also the only moment she would paint accurately when she wrote back to Pat. It's Turner's annual Illumination Day affair. Be there or be square to until. Althea paid for her groceries. Pat couldn't believe her luck, running into Althea at our market. I'll be there. You can't miss the place. It's green with gables and a wraparound porch. Of course, Pat knew which house. It was the biggest one on Ocean Avenue, and people who didn't know better assumed the brass nameplate that read Hughes' house meant it was an inn. That group had included Pat, too, until Dorothea told her otherwise. Pat had been on the hunt for the Platinum Z, but by August, she felt like she'd hallucinated her encounter with Althea. Then she asked the Littlefields if they knew her. That woman from New York who stays with Turner Hughes? Pat didn't miss the disparaging tone, but she was floored anyway. The Turner Hughes, former civil rights attorney, advisor to presidents, foreign leaders, celebrities, and corporate giants, and chairman of the Hughes Companies, the largest black-founded business traded on the stock exchange. After some digging, many told Pat that Hughes was separated, not divorced, and his relationship with Althea was premature and inappropriate, but Pat was still impressed. Now Althea was inviting her to a party at Turner Hughes' house. Bring a date if you want. The more the merrier. We will make merry. Althea winked, pocketed her change, flashed her megawatt smile, and sauntered out. Pat watched as she slid behind the wheel of a monster midnight blue Mercedes and drove off. I bet that's Turner Hughes' car. What you saying? Yes, women often compromise. Yeah, Marcus needs some therapy. Yeah, do compromising. Pat ambled along Lake Avenue, glad she'd run out of coffee. Althea made it from the projects. I can make it too. It was a chant Pat had repeated often. Until this summer, her only exposure to summer homes, boats, and people who could change lives with a phone call had been with her white classmates. To her surprise, she found the venue was filled with black folks who were accustomed to money and class. She expected to have an easier time fitting in, but finding a niche proved tricky. By listening between the lines of Dorothea and Minnie's chatter, she began to decode how we do things. The rules were passed on like a secret handshake that confirmed membership in a very exclusive club. But Pat deciphered most of it and discovered that if she peppered her conversations with "when I studied in Paris" or "my roommate's house in Newport," certain things were assumed. When she reached the harbor, Pat watched the sailboat ease into the berth next to Willie's father's boat. They'd gone out a few more times, even tried it again before Miss Cook got back, but the earth didn't move for Pat. He had stopped by last week to say he was going home early. She was kind of relieved at the time, but at least I'd have had a date. Pat decided she had to get a new outfit for the occasion, so the next morning she got up the nerve to go into a boutique she'd been window shopping all summer. 2 hours later, as she examined herself in the mirror, she thought the Kelly green poplin skirt and short-sleeved jacket looked okay. It was practical and it was on sale, but if you're trying to impersonate a scout leader, you need a beanie and a sash. Pat looked up and over her left shoulder and saw Althea. I saw you through the window. I don't know if you want any advice, but that doesn't usually stop me. Do I really look like a troop leader? On my honor, there must be something less uniform. Althea combed the racks, felt fabrics, checked price tags. She quizzed the saleswoman, sent her scurrying for a size, and 15 minutes later, Pat couldn't believe her reflection. The aqua cap sleeve dress looked great against the molasses of her skin, which glowed red gold from the sun. The bodice hugged the bosom Pat tried so hard to hide and scooped to show a little cleavage. Layers of sheer gauze and shades of blue-green floated down to just above her ankles. Althea tried a scarf in the same colors, like a headband, and the ends draped over Pat's shoulders. But it was so flirty, feminine, pretty, not like her. She shook her head, and the waterfall of tiny silver beads Althea had picked out dangled from her ears, tickled her neck. But what? You look marvelous. It shows you know how much women pay to have tits like that? Be proud of your assets. I've never worn a dress like this. Pat swung side to side so the skirt fluttered around her legs. I'm sure I can't afford it. My guess is you're good at doing things you've never done before. I was. Althea leaned in close. Look, end of the season markdown starts tomorrow, but I've convinced them to be sporting and give it to you today. These included. She dangled a pair of turquoise and silver thong sandals between her fingers. Pat gave in. She wouldn't have dared pick it for herself, but she liked the dress, and after Althea's bargaining, the outfit cost less than Pat would have paid for the boxy suit. Outside, Althea dug in her purse and handed Pat a bottle of nail polish. Don't forget the toes. See you tomorrow. She dashed across the road and melted into the swarm of shoppers. Pat had never seen anyone appear and disappear so fast, like a mirage. Miss Cook was a little startled by Pat's get-up. It seems like just yesterday you were in my 9th grade English class. Now you're a young woman. That was a good sign, but Pat was still so afraid she looked ridiculous that she stared at her fuchsia toenails all the way to the Hughes house. I'm going to the most important party of the summer with my boobs on display, and I won't know a soul except Althea. She smoothed her hand over her dress and resisted the urge to run. She had planned to go with the Littlefields, but when she stopped by earlier to help them get the house ready for tonight's celebration, Minnie wasn't feeling well, and Dorothea decided to forego the party too. Cars circled the avenue and jammed the side streets. Music and laughter floated out to greet her as she headed up the walk. Clusters of people dotted the sweeping lawn and banked the wide porch that skirted the entire house. Minnie told her longtime vineyarders were always invited, and Turner prided himself on all the famous people who accepted his invitation. Pat tried not to stare at the silver-haired anchor man relaxing on the steps, chatting with a young woman. He sounds just like that on TV. She collected her nerve and walked inside. A long, curved staircase marked the center of the foyer. Looking down from the walls were Hughes' family portraits, dozens of faces who had witnessed the last two ceremonies of American history. Pat noticed that the women looked sturdy and determined, like the pictures she had lifted from Miss Cook's archives, but these women wore lace, velvet, and pearls. The men, some suited and spectacled, others with clerical collars, looked stern and strong. In the rooms on either side of the hall, guests mingled for all they were worth. Pat popped her head in each one, looking for Althea, anybody she knew. Even Edwina would be better than walking around alone. In the dining room, a circle of men all but drooled over the legendary Lady of Jazz who had just been cast in the film version of a Broadway hit. Pat admired her pixie cap of hair and chiseled features. Boy, Gail would love this. Glad you made it, Althea materialized, dressed to the nines in bronze, black, and gold, very Egyptian from head to toe. Pat thought she looked great, but sounded subdued. It's all so... Yeah, I know, Althea signaled a waiter. Campari and soda and make it fast. She turned back to Pat. Turner likes... No, he needs all this. She glanced around the room. It's like oxygen to him. Why is she telling me this? Pat didn't know what to say, so she smiled and nodded. Althea took a long drag on a cigarette and flickered her ash at a parlor palm. You look fabulous, by the way. No wink, no glimmer, no clever remark. I wonder what's wrong. But I still feel... Listen to me. Don't ever let on you feel self-conscious. Althea took hold of Pat's arm as she spoke and squeezed so hard that Pat felt her nails. Always act like you belong, because if you believe in yourself, other people will too. Then you can do anything. Anything. Do you hear me? Her dark eyes had an edgy, almost angry glint. I do believe in myself. Mostly. Pat was startled by the intensity of the lecture. It was hardly cocktail chatter. Althea, I've got a job for you. The resonant baritone demanded attention, and Pat looked up to see Turner Hughes filling the doorway. She turned back to Althea in time to see her new friend's stony masklet firmly into place. The congressman has to make a phone call. I need you to take him up to my study. Turner's shirt, monogrammed on the pocket, gleamed blue-white against skin that was black like a moonless sky night. His top trousers broke perfectly over oxblood tassel loafers. He never registered Pat's presence. Of course. Althea threaded her arm through the legislators and smiled coolly as Turner walked away. "Excuse me, Pat. Do enjoy yourself." Then she escorted the portly politician upstairs. Pat recognized the congressman not just from the news, but from his election year Sunday morning visits to Mount Moriah. On her way out the gardens, Pat stopped by the bar and ordered a Campari and soda. The drink had a bitter bite, but if Althea can take it. She spoke to Mrs. Henry A. Jackson, who was refreshing her bourbon, and had to be reminded that they'd met. "She knows good and well who I am. I had to tell her my whole life story, the witch." Pat ran into Edwina's parents by the Rose Arbor, the Lewises, and Indianola, a mountain of flesh under a tropical flower pup tent, and William in a baby blue leisure suit and white patent shoes were proof that money couldn't buy everything. When they found out Edwina hadn't been invited, Pat gloated and spoke about her good friend Althea Satterfield. She said her best to Edwina and sailed off bravely on a sea of confidence. Act like you belong. Servers worked at long buffet tables laid end to end with an overwhelming array of food. Two men in white aprons and toques oversaw a brick barbecue pit the size of a tool shed, but Pat was too excited to eat. She eased closer to a table where a best-selling author captivated his dinner companions, just like the griots in his book with tales of his recent trip to West Africa. Pat eavesdropped until she spied several men in suits weaving cautiously through the crowd. Then she saw Turner Hughes shaking hands with the senator from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and felt power surging through her body, like she had plugged herself into an electrical outlet. At that moment, she realized that if she made it this far just to be here, that her dreams were possible. "I'm not crazy. I can do it." At dusk, the crowd thinned as folks left for the tabernacle. Pat wanted to say goodbye to Althea. She went back inside and checked the rooms off the main hall and was drawn through the open double doors into the library. She fingered the gilded spines of books that lined the shelves and had just stopped in front of an 1847 copy of the North Star, displayed in a glass case along with the manumission papers from Fort James Hughes, dated 1823, when she heard Althea. Pat started toward the voice, but stopped when she saw them through the partially open door of a smaller room that adjoined the library. Althea abruptly turned to walk away. Turner spun her around by her shoulder and kissed her roughly, his hand groping at her body. She wrestled free and wiped her mouth in disgust. Pat backed along the walls, but her eyes remained glued to the scene. "I've done everything the way you wanted it, Hughes." Althea spit the words. "It's never enough, is it? Well, you don't own me, and nobody ever will." Pat didn't stop moving until she joined the stream of humanity headed for the campground celebration. She caught sight of the Platinum Z roaring out of sight and wondered what had gone wrong, and when she would cross Althea Satterfield's path again. All right, that's the end of that long chapter, chapter 4. So yeah, I'll be tuning in again as soon as I can. Again, if you need to catch up on the other chapters and any of my other readings, I've read Black Boy by Richard Wright. I've read The Coldest Winter Ever by Sister Soldier. I've also read her autobiography, No Disrespect. I've read Recapturing the African Mind by Bruce Bridges. Yeah, I got a number of books on my YouTube channel, so go follow me at Morgan Myers. You can type in Storytime with More. My channel will come up. Appreciate y'all for tuning in, and I'll be checking in with you guys again soon. Have a great evening. Peace.